I work for the railroad locomotive assistant driver position. I will not go into the details of the work. I can only say that my position is the most low among train operation. Know yourself, wipe the diesel from oil, knocking down the ice off the chassis. Yeah, sip your tea in cozy cabin. In general, me everything suits. What can a 20-year-old complain about, guy? When immediately after Dali's practice work, except perhaps fragrant the smell of diesel fuel from clothes, and sleepless nights. About one of those nights and there will be talk. It happened about 2 years ago in mid-January. I just started independent work. Threw me on large station located in the Central Military Village. The airfield itself and station kept the village afloat. At 50 kilometers from my city, lived in a rented apartment. I was not particularly pleased with this position. But on the other hand, aspects independent life also had their own charms. Although sometimes longing rolled over. My next shift was approaching, had to go through the night. I watched the series sitting at the laptop. It was on the clock 16 hours. Exhaling, I thought to myself, well, here it is again, didn't sleep before the shift, I'll be in again state of boiled beets. Okay, I will survive. From watching the series, me distracted by a phone call. It was Andrei Pavlovich, is my machinist, cheerful bald man in his 60s. Knew his job and locomotive like the back of your hand. I took handset. Hello Dima, listen, I'm not going to change today. I'll come. It was urgently necessary to go to the city, took a day off. You will come to the depot, go to contractor, they will attach you to another driver, for this shift, and then I'll come and you will be with me again. His voice was a little different from the usual. He was breathing faster than usual, periodically swallowed saliva. Yes, and in general the voice sounded kinda creepy or something like that. I understand, I'll come in. Everything is fine with you there. Without jumped off the shift, drive away urgently needed. Yes, everything is in order, wife asked to visit her brother. And generally speaking, why are you climbing into other people's affairs? From the machine you won't get out until the diesel shines. Okay, just don't hit, have a good road. Andrei Pavlovich hung up the phone, nothing answering. I looked at the phone dissatisfied mug, and chuckling continued to watch series. As time passed, I looked at the forecast weather, -26 and chilled fog, just super. Got ready and went to work. I went to the contractor, they introduced me their driver. I was tall, tight, a guy of about 26, as it turned out, I graduated and got a job here. During conversation he fumbled in memes and games, then what should I thought? After all the tedium, briefings and other preludes, we moved to our car. Along the way he conveyed to me what we are working today with a base whose industrial facility prepares gravel for the railroad. Well, it is expected where the inexperienced will be sent driver. Except on a solitary path with wagons at the ends, only rides back and forth, taking the wagons. I thought yes, and it's good that today the Palak left. Every time we work at the base, something happens, then check vigilance skips, then the speed will exceed, he has no luck here, reluctance again on the carpet to the boss. Having accepted the car, we drove out onto the road and began work. Everything went perfectly, train driving, I chatted with a colleague, and smoked right in cockpit. Palak did not allow this. So half of the shift is over. At midnight from the speaker the radio station heard the cherished, the base in those parking lot, we didn't have lunch, was not officially, but we were allocated a few hours to inspect and locomotive service. We use this time is up to you. We've moved out about halfway through, about 7 kilometers to station, and so much to the base. This was the most comfortable area for a little sleep. There was no spotlight, no roar locomotives, and more. Was only solitary path and dense forest plantation both sides. Tightening the brake, the driver sent me to inspection of the chassis. And he threw his legs on remote and began to stick in the phone. Here's a lazy one, I could help, and thought I, and went down from the locomotive. With me there was a flashlight, a hammer, and mittens. Wading through the deep snow I went around the car in a circle. The chassis was normal, I wanted to go back. But the sight of me bewitched, fog, go out and hear the milky sea, the rails leaving as if in nowhere. And a lone locomotive. Majestic monster, a kind of green metal hulk. whose light sank into this shroud, is literally 10 meters away. Breathtaking, I lit a cigarette and, feeling that half a thermos of tea drunk the day before asks to go outside, decided to move out of need. I did not piss at the car. The driver could look at the mirror. Yes, and in general it was una aesthetic. I went down the embankment down to landings, highlighting the path with a lantern. Not it was enough at that moment to fall into in the dark. Did his business. I noticed not far in the thick of trees some rusty nameplate with white paint spots. Carefully, I moved towards her, passing took 10 meters from the bottom branch of a tree rusty plaque. Still on it read clearly TEZ 692. It was a number plate with some locomotive. Such a find was like a rarity. For connoisseurs, troika, quite an old locomotive. I will attach it to the bumper of the car, or to I'll put the room. Here is this prey. Joyfully looked at Nikotka, when suddenly something crunched on the right. I sharply turned around, illuminating the lantern. Light drowned in fog. And a couple of tens of meters, two bright lights were clearly visible. The animal roams. Look how the eyes sparkle. I hope not a wolf. Having said these words, I saw the light start slowly dim and then disappear altogether. To me felt uncomfortable, from head to toe, goosebumps gone. I turned around a couple of times, illuminating the space around you. No one, everything was quiet. Even too quiet, not even the rumble of a diesel engine was heard. I have gone so far, either the driver of it drowned out. Okay, you have to return, not the month of May. Nevertheless, holding the tablet under the arm of the left hand, I hurriedly walked in a measure of deep snow towards the locomotive. It was safe there, warm and light. The beast could not climb there. I didn't want to think about what I had seen. Branches crunched under my feet. But suddenly a completely different crunch was heard, sound like a large bone breaking, or someone's spine. It sounded pretty disgusting. The crunch sounded from somewhere behind. Frozen in place, I stood for 15 seconds motionless, digging a bunch of thoughts into head, and counting the frequent heartbeats. Feet became unreasonably cold, they a little pneumonia, either from the cold, or from horror. Then I slowly turned around. The light of a Merc lantern in the thick of fog, and meters 10 from me again there were these lights. They were higher than at that time, by about the height of my eyes. They moved slowly, outlining the lying 8, and again there was this crunch. Now I understand that was its source. This creature tossed its head and crunched its vertebrae. After 7 seconds, disgusting cervical eye gymnastics stopped. The crackling of bones ceased, but to replace it came a whisper. Talked about 10 voices simultaneously, male and female. Far and near, even children's were heard vote. They all merged into a mess noise. It was impossible to make out what they say. They seemed to penetrate me head. Through his own thoughts, a stream of whispers. I was still able to give a command to my body, run. I abruptly turned around and gave gas. I ran as fast as I could run, mess underfoot, and heavy winter overalls. On the go I maneuvered between trees, and jumped over all sorts of pits and ravines. My feet carried me autopilot, and I carried my junk and covenant plate. It's strange that I don't threw her out. At least she doesn't was to blame for all this bullshit. I ran, I don't feel tired. Soon I began to strain. That landing seemed longer than it was before this. It feels like I ran around kilometers, and the trees did not end. After a couple of minutes of the move, I ran out to deep snow, and the strip ended, our railroad tracks appeared. I ran into her like steps, although there was a good one slope and gravel. Standing in the middle of the track I stopped. Followed by a faint feeling peace of mind, I got out. So stop, where is the locomotive? I spoke displeasedly at the top of my voice. Looking around, I did not find my car. Taking myself in hand, I assumed that in that landing I went to the side. And a locomotive somewhere further on the way, but because of the fog, it expected not visible. Well, there was nothing to do. And I went to the direction of the base. Crunched underfoot snow, I walked quickly with a single purpose, get to your iron fortress. On way, I began to pay attention to environment. The rails were kind of rusty, the joints were wide. Stopping, I kicked the snow a couple of times under myself, and saw what was under my feet lies an old rotten wooden sleeper. Twisting the toe of the work boot and broke off a piece of frozen rotten tree. Characteristic smell of creosote, substance used to treat with sleepers. Classic railroad smell. It was not the way. Where I am. Looking around, I saw another sign. It was a milestone. Was installed on a concrete shaft, white in places, rusty angular plate. On it were the numbers 276, and on the other half after the corner 275. It definitely wasn't my way. The path to the base was of only 15 kilometers. He was on reinforced concrete sleepers and there were no columns. Trying to figure this shit out, I looked at the pointer when it was already familiar sound. It was the same crunch cervical vertebrae. But now he was so close behind me that it felt like it was my spine. But it wasn't him. That moment hit me cold sweat, blood pounding in the temples, and I began to grope for the handle of the hammer, lying in the pocket of an orange vest. Grabbing a tool and getting ready hit, I turned around sharply. A meter from I stood it. I can't name it human, but it remotely resembled a woman with a hunched, pale body with extended limbs. In torn, dirty rags, reminiscent of a dress, it shook her head very slowly, arching the neck. A living person is clearly not capable of this. Her face was terrible, torn skin, exposed, pierced skull, scalp with rare gray and long hair hung on a pair centimeters of skin. The mouth was on one side torn to the cheek, showing brown rotten animal fangs. On the other hand, he smiled psychopathically. Eyes were deprived of eyelids and eyebrows. They were absolutely white. In thin hands, 2 fingers, it was holding some kind of lump wrapped in old newspaper. From the convolution, arms and legs could be seen. It was a child, just a baby. Dark was dripping from the newspaper, stinky blood. What I saw made me cringe muscles. The plate from the locomotive fell out of armpits and clinking crashed on the rubble. In the same second it sharply bent neck down, looking at the plate. When she saw her, she slowly raised her head, uttering a guttural wheeze. Her face was vile smile. I knew what to beat, or she will eat me. Swung his hand back, and ready to put all your strength into a blow to crack her skull before porridge condition. But someone did it for me. A hand appeared behind the creature with hammer and juicy hit on the temple. The shock part entered the brain, emitting a squelch. But this one was absolutely shit. She just twitched and abruptly turning around ran into the landing, uttering some mournful sounds. Hit her, I would already be dead. Out of the fog someone stepped towards me. Man, it was an old man in old-style railway uniform around the 70s. On his head was a blue cap with shiny emblem of the Ministry of Railways, Messages of the USSR. He had a wide stern face with green eyes and gorgeous white mustache. I'm a little taken aback, frozen in place. Grandfather exhaled, cleaned hammer in the snow, painting it in black-brown. Then shifting your gaze said to me, "Let the gun go, don't tensed, and what are you frozen?" His words sounded like a spell. I'm right there, lowered the hand prepared for the blow, and stood exactly in front of him. "Father, where are we?" I said, swallowing saliva. "Well, are you blind?" Beaton looked at the column for a minute, but the number did not I remember, he said kindly, but at the same time with some reproach. "Yes, I understand that 276. But there is no such kilometer on this path. And the path is not the same. And I don't know where the locomotive is, and what stood in front of me. Yes, what you chatter like a machine gun. You are yours, you can't believe your eyes. It's written 276, it means so it is. Go the way and you will find what they only teach you there," he chuckled. "And what the hell was standing here? You're her, cracked with a hammer. The less you know the better, sleep. Don't worry about it, let's go." The driver was waiting, he said, and showed me a side behind me. "Okay, then we'll figure it out." "Thank you, Father, take care of yourself," I said, and got ready pick up the plate, but the old man got me outstripped. "But stealing is not good, this is mine, and say hello to Andre, say from his growl," he said with a slight frown. I did kind of like, yeah okay, whatever, turned around and walked in the right direction. 20 seconds later, I heard, most importantly, "Don't turn around." And though I passed meters 100, it sounded like kilometer distance. After walking about 2 kilometers, I noticed that the rails became shiny from rolling and lie on reinforced concrete sleepers. Somewhere in front of a blackened huge square silhouette. It was my locomotive. Bolt diesel charged me with an impulse, and I rushed to its purpose. I flew into the cockpit and closed all the outer doors, and then, seated take a break, just passed out on my own chair. The driver woke me up in the morning. We passed shift and went home, In the smoking room old hard workers talked about Palak. They say it's hard for a man, he survived this, but he's still on this place is sent, and on the anniversary crash. Having smoked, I caught up with one locksmith, and asked about what he could. He told me that earlier in the beginning 60s, there was no base, no way to it, there was a stage between stations. And one driver had a wife, poor thing blind and mad at 32. She has took her baby and went to the path where threw herself under the train. That train was driven by her husband. Since then, at the 206th kilometer, fuck you understand. Then the red traffic light will close, then the radio will make some noise, a whisper, or a child's cry. And in the fog or rain often see some woman with burning eyes. The trains were there. Path collapsed. Then the path was dismantled and paved another. To the base. Didn't like the guys at place. And this is all somehow connected with a certain growling, I asked as I lit another cigarette. The locksmith looked like I knew something forbidden. He lit a cigarette and reluctantly said that in the 77th this Igorovic was a machinist and he had assistants was Andrei Pavlovich. On unknown reason, half of the crutches on that kilometer was torn out of the sleeper the train went downhill. The driver died before his death he sent assistant in the diesel room. And myself before the last one was held by the crane of the train brake, and reported the situation by radio. Since then, Palak constantly sees his growl on the side of the 276th kilometer of the way. They went to diesel locomotive of the 3rd series with serial number 692. It turned out that the Palak did not go to his brother wife, and in the cemetery to his fallen colleague who gave him a chance at life. Through week I wrote an application for a transfer to station in your city. They don't pay less there, it's not worse there. But the main thing less likely to stumble again on that it. Since then I have been working. Palak retired and lives for himself calm as it's possible after all that's happened. On a telegram arrived last week that area was found inhumane the mutilated bodies of the locomotive crew and abandoned locomotive. I will never go back there.